The London-based Syrian Observatory of Human Rights says all of those kidnapped are Sunnis and include the women, children and family members of President Assad's forces. Joining me now from Beirut is our correspondent Adam Pletts. Adam, what's the latest on those kidnappings?
Well, these approximately 400 people were taken following this Islamic State group assault on the town of Deir Ezzor, which started with suicide bombings. Now, it's very difficult to establish exactly what's happened to these people. We understand that they've been taken towards Raqqa, the self-proclaimed capital of the Islamic State group. But of course, it wasn't just the abductions. There was also a number of people killed in that assault. Now, I have to stress that these numbers have been contested by activists in the town who say that neither the number of people killed nor the number of people abducted were as high as has been reported in some places. Nonetheless, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, as you just mentioned, has said that around 135 people were killed, 50 of them pro-government forces and 85 or so were civilians. And then the government itself, through state media, has put that number even higher at something like 300 people. So who've been killed, and saying also that they were women, children and the elderly. So while it's very difficult for us to say, perhaps to clarify these numbers, what we can say is that there was a major assault. It was a setback for the government forces, and this, of course, is one of the very last places that the government still has a stronghold in the eastern areas of Syria. So it's certainly a setback there for them.
And Adam, that assault by the Islamic State group is still ongoing. What more do you know about the conditions in the town?
That's right, and the Syrian government forces launched a counteroffensive supported by Russian airstrikes. But this is one of the, as I was just saying, one of the last places in Syria still held by government forces, but it's been besieged on all sides by the Islamic State group for the last year or so now. By some accounts, there are as many as 200,000 people still in those besieged areas. Now, that seems a little high, perhaps, because the population of the town before the civil war was not very much higher than that. Nonetheless, there's a substantial number of people still there, whatever the figures, and there's been concerns for their security, especially given reports recently of severe shortages in basic goods and foods, including some cases of reported malnutrition. Now, if you link this into what happened to Deir just recently, where people were under siege, and aid was eventually delivered. One of the main points that aid organizations were making was that that's not the only place in Syria by any means that's in those kind of conditions. And of course, here we see in Deir Ezzor, this is exactly one of those other places that they were talking about. So very severe indeed for the people who are still trapped there besieged, although they are getting some food by way of airlifts by Syrian helicopters and Russian aid drops also.
Adam Pletts in Beirut, thank you very much for that insight this morning here on France 24.